This is our 5th real estate career seminar. I don't know, can I see a show of hands who's majoring in real estate? All right, so the rest of you are sort of prospecting, see if you want to be interested in real estate. I'm a value-added investor like Sonny is, Sonny Giamani at the end. But I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about how I got involved in real estate. So I'm going to talk about from when I was sitting in the chair like you to when I got here. And if you look at the cap I wore, it says 66. That's when I was sitting in the chair like you. Those few years have passed. So I went from college to Procter & Gamble, and I was in marketing. And one of my dramatic recollections was the higher executives, the vice presidents, complaining about their investments. And it fascinated me because I thought about it. They work very hard all day to make all the money they're making, and then they're taking their, quote, nest egg. Now, nest egg is very precious money. To make the nest egg, you got to make the gross, got to pay IRS, then you've got all your living expenses, then maybe you have some vacation and mad money, and then whatever's left that you or your partner don't spend is your nest egg. So they're taking this precious nest egg money and giving it to investment advisors and getting apparently very unsatisfactory results. So you know how you're taught in school never to generalize, and how the only way we get through life is by generalizing. If you see a dog snarling and baring its teeth, generalize and get the hell out of there. So I thought, there's really two kinds of executives. There's executives that don't specialize in investments, and there's executives who do specialize in investments. And the advantage of executives who do specialize in investments is that they can invest in what they're doing. The Procter & Gamble marketing guys couldn't invest in their marketing. They could buy Procter & Gamble stock, but that wouldn't react directly to their work. So I thought, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back to business school and become an investment specialist. And of course, the natural thing to, I don't want to say natural thing to do, but the natural inclination is to go to Wall Street. So I went back to business school and I specialized in security, portfolio management, investment management, and I didn't like it. I was just uncomfortable with it. If any of you follow the stock market goes up and down based on very emotional, non-empirical things. Look at Lyft, the Uber imitator. It just did an IPO, stock went way up. All of a sudden, stock plummeted. So the brightest people on Wall Street aren't trying to analyze these things in any kind of bright fashion. They're trying to figure out what the mob's going to do. The mob being us, you know, the public, what we're going to do. So think of that. Lyft comes out, you're going to predict it's going to be perceived favorably, and then you're going to perceive the top and watch it go down. So you're going to buy it, ride it, sell it, short it. Not me, I'm not able to do that. So I was not comfortable being a securities specialist or major. And there was a famous professor on campus named Phil David. He was Phil Davidowitz, but he changed his name to David, and his brother changed his name to Marty Davis. So when you meet him, he says, "This is my brother Marty Davis," you know. Oh, okay. Anyway, Phil Davidowitz worked for Bill Zeckendorf, and Bill Zeckendorf was one of the legendary real estate people in New York City. And I walked into his course, I just went to audit it, and I walked into his course. Within 10 minutes, I knew I was where I wanted to be. You're talking about real estate. And what makes it different? It exists. What's a stock? It's this flotsam jetsam piece of paper that says you own X% of some company. And what's that worth? It's what the mob thinks it's worth that day, that minute. You own a building, you own a building. You want to analyze the building? You read the leases. Now you're going to look at the physical condition of the building. Go up to the roof. You look at the roof. How many patches on the roof? You go to the floor right under the roof. You know what you do? You look up for leaks. You look at the ceiling tiles. You call the elevator company. I want a report on how many outages there have been, how much maintenance has been. Go and look at the parking lot. Is it all chopped up? Are there potholes? Is it alligatored? Does it need to be repaved? I mean, you can do a really comprehensive job. So you can look at the leases and evaluate them, and then you can look at what your capital improvements are. You can look at what your expenses are. And then buildings like that sell within a somewhat narrow band of cap rate. So you get a real sense of value. It's not the lottery that Wall Street is. So that captured me. That's what I wanted to do, and that's what I have done. Just some more things I want to share with you. Some benefits of real estate that people aren't aware of. Let's say you buy an investment with a 8% return. Well, that's a little high today, but you buy it with a 6% return. In almost every case, that 6% return is fully sheltered. In fact, if you set up your depreciation schedules correctly, it's not only sheltered, it shelters any other income you have. Not all of it, but you'll get extra shelter. So it's not just 6%, it's 6% after tax, like a municipal bond. Second thing, you can't generalize. There's two kinds of people. People that have investments and people that do piecework. Lawyers do piecework. Accountants do piecework. Professors do piecework. They get paid as long as they teach. Say, I don't like to teach anymore. I quit. Don't get paid anymore. You buy an investment, it's going to keep paying you whether you're in bed or on vacation or working. I have investments I've literally never seen. They're net leases to credit tenants, and I've bought them for financial reasons. And the check comes in monthly. I don't have to go look at them. So that's another great attribute of real estate. Now let me tell you the two best attributes. Let's pretend you buy a property for $5 million. And let's say you leverage it pretty well. You get a $4 million mortgage. And you put $1 million of your cash in. So 4 + 1 = 5. And you do a very good job of increasing the rents. And over 3-4 years, you make the property worth $10 million. So now you want to get a new mortgage. So you go to the bank and you say, property's worth 10, I want 8. They send their appraiser out. The appraiser agrees with you. They say, we're going to give you an $8 million mortgage. So you go to the closing, and they've got the $8 million. Now, the first thing they're going to make sure is that the $4 million is paid off, because they want the first lien. So it's going to have nothing to do with you. They want a payoff statement from the first lender, and the first money goes to pay off the first lender. Now there's $4 million left. Where does that go? Even the real estate people don't know?
Your pocket.
You know. Do you hear them? In your pocket. You answering? That looks like timeout. You're playing basketball? Okay. So where does the $4 million goes in your pocket? What? Is he saying next
deal?
Oh, next deal. Okay. I mean, you buy the next deal. Yeah, but it goes in your pocket first. Okay. Is it taxable or tax-free? Someone stand up and say it. Why would it be taxable? It's a loan. If I loan you $100, is that taxable? If I loan you $1 million, if I'd really like you, I give you $5 million to have a good life. Is that taxable? You're right. It's tax-free. Now let's say you make it worth $20 million. You get a $16 million mortgage. You pay off the 8 more goes in your pocket. It's all tax-free. I mean, the IRS could be at the closing. It's all tax-free. It's not a loophole. It's one of the great benefits of real estate. Now the final one. Does anybody know what a 1031 exchange is? Yes, ma'am. She's absolutely right. Give her an A, Morris. She's absolutely right. So now you make the property worth $40 million. So most people say, oh my God, I've got $35 million worth of capital gains. Not if you do a 1031. What's 1031? It's the title of the IRS chapter code. It's not a loophole. It's a whole chapter on how to do it. You just have to make sure you don't touch the money. It goes to what's known as you go to a closing, the money goes to a qualified intermediary, which is normally a title company. Then you identify another property to buy, and you say, buy that property, and all the 40 goes into that property. Again, IRS could be there. It's kosher. You pay no tax. And you can go on doing that. I have fourth generation legacy 1031 exchanges where I've gone in, flip to one, flip to another, flip to another, flip to another. So it's a wonderful, wonderful mechanism for deferring taxes. Now, some skeptic out there is going to say, but you're going to pay the tax man someday. No, not if you die. If you die, your kids don't pay the tax man. It gets marked to market, they get new market value, and they don't pay tax. So those are the advantages of real estate. That's why I'm in real estate. That's why I've enjoyed it so much. It also is a business that I think attracts entrepreneurial types. Solos, 1, 2 people, small groups. In our world here in New Jersey, there's Prologis, which is a massive industrial company. There's Devco, which Chris runs. But mostly, you've got Frank Reek companies. Frank Reek's a one individual, took over from his father. Frank Reek has, I don't know, Charlie, what would you say, 15 million? Yeah, 15, 20 million maybe square feet of space. So it attracts people like that with a strong personality that create a team around them and enjoy themselves. All right. Oh, by the way, on your way out, we have a bunch of free copies of Real Estate New Jersey. Bet you can guess who publishes this. But this is New Jersey's only commercial real estate magazine.
Oh, I forgot about it.
You what?
I forgot it was yours. I just thought you were being nice to them.
I am being nice. It's free. All right, let's get to the interesting speakers. First, on my left is Mr. Chris Palladino. Chris has Rutgers blood running in his veins. Went to college at Rutgers, went to law school at Rutgers. I want to cut to it. He runs Devco, which is New Brunswick Development Corporation. That's the long name, but everybody calls it Devco. And they've built $5.5 billion worth of space. 5.5 million square feet of space worth about $2 billion. And now, I think Governor Christie got you first started on Atlantic City.
Yeah.
And now Murphy said, keep doing it. So he's doing the Gateway project in Atlantic City with Stockton and the gas company. And it's another chapter So he's, I would say, the biggest urban renovator in New Jersey, if not the country. And it's right here. He's done an enormous amount of buildings on this campus and all in New Brunswick. And he's probably one of the main reasons why New Brunswick is so much safer now than it was 20 years ago. Chris Palladino.
I, unlike most of you, know nothing about real estate. I was a political science major and a history major in college. Always thought I'd go to law school. Ended up going to Rutgers Law School. Thought I'd be a litigator. Went to work for a big law firm in North Jersey. It's one of those places that was kind of cool, and they let 27-year-olds actually try cases. So probably in the first 4 years, I tried 6 cases to a conclusion of a jury. Had some fun. And then one day I looked and saw that the guys who are now my age were standing at the elevator, and they still had those 2 big, heavy black bags, and they were taking them home. And I said, geez, those guys make a lot more money than me, and the cases are worth more, but they're doing the same thing. I don't know if I want to do this the rest of my life. So I had a great opportunity, which I'll get to in a second. One of the things I just want to point out, and there was some of you who were in the real estate club the other day that were in my office, and I said a lot of the same things. But you should really be nice to each other, because none of you are going very far. You're probably going to end up somewhere geographically within 40, 50, 60 miles of each other, and you're going to keep happening upon each other. And one of the good things about going to a place like Rutgers, and one of the good things about being at a place like New Jersey, is that you do continue to bump into each other. I mean, look, particularly in the business that I'm in, I shared an office with a governor when he was 27 years old. I tried my last case as a lawyer against the governor, and one of my law school professors became the governor. So in the last 7 people who've been governors, I've kind of had personal relationships with 3 of them, and I didn't anger any of them. One of them was Chris Christie, and I really didn't want to get him angry. So I could have done something really bad when I was 29 years old and beat him in a trial, but I didn't. But that relationship ended up paying off enormously. I did share an office with Jim McGreevey, and we won't talk about that. They're all too young. That's the problem to really know that. But I was really fortunate, and Jim Florio, who had been my administrative law professor in law school, became the governor of New Jersey. And he said, "You want to come work for me?" I said, yes. It was an easy out. I went and became deputy counsel to the governor, and after my wife and I committed financial suicide. She was I did what Bill Clinton did. I married the smartest woman in my law school class, which I thought was good for the gene pool. And she was a very good lawyer. She decided to have a child. I participated. And then she decided to stay home, and I left the private practice law and went to work for the government, so we committed economic suicide. If you're going to do that, do it when you're 29 so you don't get used to having any money. We spent all my savings after the first year and a half. I went and was fortunately, a friend of mine became the executive director of the New Jersey Economic Development Authority. I got a $20,000 raise, and he said, you can be in charge of the real estate program. This is the late 80s, early 90s. The world had gone to hell, and we were a bunch of 30-year-olds trying to fix the economy of New Jersey, and I became head of the real estate program. And basically, that meant trying to steal companies from New York City to move to Jersey City. Did that for a while. Me being a good Democrat, I've always relied on Republicans to kind of advance me. So with Jim Florio losing the election, forced me to go out and get a real job. I was going to go practice law in New York, and a friend of mine who had taken over a bank, and here's a good real estate lesson. Banks move. If you're trying to get people to move, it's where the CEO or the chairman actually, it's closer where they want to be. So he moved the bank from Elizabeth, New Jersey to New Brunswick, and he said, why don't you come? There's this thing called Devco, and the guys at J&J, to give you a little bit of background, Devco had been started in 1976 when I was 16, so I had nothing to do with it, by Johnson & Johnson when they had decided to stay in New Brunswick. And they had pretty much, it outlived its usefulness to the corporation. And George said, wait, there's this Devco thing, and I said, yeah, I know, I used to protest against them when I was in college. And he said, yeah, why don't we try to fix it? He was always, said you want to buy low, sell high. So I took a job where we had $100,000 in the bank and $6 million unsecured debt. And I went home and told my wife this, and she said, okay. I said, don't worry, it really sucks, and we're only gonna probably do this for a year. I'll get a real job. Last year, my wife and I bought a farm. I went to get a mortgage, and she looked up the application and said, oh, is the year up yet? It's time to get a real job. But this got to be just a whole lot of fun. So what do we really do? We basically build public-private partnerships. We do projects that other people either don't think about doing or don't want to do because there's not a profit in it. Most likely do this by spending a lot of time of trying to understand all of the missing pieces in a city, let it be in New Brunswick or in Newark and Atlantic City, and into themselves, those institutions or governmental agencies or the private sector wouldn't do a project by itself. But if I find a way to kind of bring people together and to figure out a financing and figure out an ownership structure that works, we've been able to do projects. So one of the things that Paul said we need to do is like kind of what do you do when you go, he gave us a list of things that we were supposed to talk about. And what do you do to make money? Well, we build public-private partnerships and we do this. So when I was here at Rutgers, that's what, this is a building on Livingston Avenue across from the State Theater. This is the old hotel that was across the street. That's what that entire block looks like. And then when we were done with it, we finished the Heldridge Hotel, which is 250 hotel rooms, 150 apartments, retail, restaurants, and put together a structure that included, first position debt, second position debt. We financed this building for the first time and didn't build it because 9/11 happened. Then went back to the drawing board and figured out how to do it. This is most of these sites you don't recognize because they're not there anymore. But this was a parking lot and some old buildings directly next to the Rutgers campus and next to the train station. And you may recognize it now as that building. This is a good example of how we put a lot of pieces together to make a project work. So if you start at the top of this building, there's 3 floors of home ownership condominiums. There's 10 floors of apartments, which are both market rate and affordable units. There's 80,000 square feet of office space. There's 50,000 square feet of retail space. And the retail space is anchored by the Barnes & Noble, which is the Rutgers bookstore. One thing I learned about in real estate is that kind of the public improvements you do is what people really remember. And you're able to now walk directly from the excuse me, westbound train platform onto the Rutgers campus through this walkway. When we built the hotel, which I showed you, people just only really, it was $120 million when we built it, which was a lot of money. All people talked about was the park we restored in front of the building. So how many hours a week do I work? You're almost always working. It's not work because you're always thinking, you're always on the phone. This thing probably ruined all of our lives. So you're kind of answering questions and texting. But, it probably work, 60 to 70 hours in the office a week. And, but, there's an hour drive in the morning and there's an hour drive at home that you're on the phone. It doesn't count. And, as Marissa said to me, was telling somebody today, and at 11 o'clock, if Chris thinks of something, I better have the answer. So it's not work. It's not work because it is kind of the excitement of the things that we do. Our work environment is kind of chaotic. I was pretty honest with, so we only have 12 people who work at Devco. Most of them, many of them, some of them, came as interns and then never left. Didn't either get the hint or we offered them a job. But Marissa Butchney, who's one of my vice presidents, came as she was working at the Gap. She had been a planning student, as a friend of a friend. I said to somebody who else the other day who's in this room, well, it's a lot easier to find a job if you have a job, so why don't you come work for us this summer, and you can look for a job and maybe it'll work out. And she has a daughter that's now going to college, so she's been there for 24 years, I think. And Sarah Clark, who works for me, worked for me at the EDA, so she's worked for me now for about 27 years. And most of the other folks are people who, most of them did come as interns, and some of them stayed. And some of them now are like getting married and having children. So It's a pretty chaotic environment. We've actually gotten to this weird work environment where we all sit in the conference room, 3 or 4 of us at a time, and we may have 3 or 4 phone conversations going, and then we go back to what we were working on, and then somebody starts working on something else. It's our own version of WeWorks. I don't go into my office that often unless I need to have a private conversation or really think. But we do find ourselves working on a number of things at one time. I mean, to put it in perspective, we had $100,000 and $6 million of unsecured debt when we got here. I mean, we have a pipeline right now where I will break ground in the next 12 months on $700 million worth of projects. Probably at a minimum. We finished over the last 2 years about $500 million worth of projects. So our projects have just gotten incrementally bigger. We're starting a project in Atlantic City that's $62 million. We're starting a project in New Brunswick that's $500 million. They take the same amount of work, but we're a not-for-profit. What does a not-for-profit mean? Not-for-profit means I don't get to buy a house in Spring Lake. They pay me relatively well. One of the things they ask is kind of like, what can you expect in our business? I mean, look, the 2 women who work for me make $300,000, $310,000. So, you know, all of us have had opportunities to co-work in the private sector. I find I like being in charge. I like deciding what we work on, and I like doing things that really make a difference. This is a project that we worked on. We called it the New Brunswick Wellness Project. We built a grocery store. We built a fitness and wellness center, 60,000 square feet of fitness center and a pool. What's really been satisfying about this project, because when you're not-for-profit, you can do these things, is that the mayor said to me, you know, I'd love to build a community center. The YMCA and the YWCA had left in town. I explained to him that he could probably afford to build it. He could never afford to run it. So when I talk about public-private partnerships, we got the Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital to be the partner and to be the operator. And I was able to bring enough new market tax credits to the project to subsidize the operation. So if you were a New Brunswick resident, you got to go half price. And you got to go at a price which would have cost if we had had a Y. And every 3rd grader learns to swim for free because we coordinate their PE classes and we bring them there. And I'm going to destroy the computer. So we do kind of not only do well, but we do good. And we try to do projects that actually kind of change the community holistically, not just structurally and not just physically. This is a project that will always be really, really important to me. And none of you even know where this is. This is on Seminary Place in New Brunswick. Those of you who went to school, I guess before 5 years ago, never understood what this really ugly piece of property was, smack in the middle of the campus. This is between the Voorhees Mall and where like Millendoler and Tinsley dormitories are. There was an entire block. It's an interesting piece of property. Rutgers was founded by the Dutch Reformed Church of America. The Dutch had gotten pretty annoyed since they had been here before anybody else but didn't have a university. The Presbyterians had Princeton, the Unitarians had Harvard, the Quakers had Penn, and they wanted to start a church. They couldn't get the King of Holland to give them a charter, so they Ben Franklin, who was the illegitimate son of Governor Franklin, I don't remember what his first name was, but he was the illegitimate son of Ben Franklin. He was the royal governor of New Jersey, gave them a charter. And by the 1800, Rutgers was pretty much bankrupt, and the Dutch Reformed Church moved the seminary from Brooklyn to New Brunswick, and it's where it's been ever since. And probably since 1820, every Rutgers president has kind of coveted this property. And I was summoned to John Hanson's office. Thought he wanted to talk to me about Atlantic City. And he said to me, what are we going to do about the seminary project? And I said, what do you mean, what are we going to do about the seminary project? He said, look, this is really important to me. My wife's father and her grandfather were Reformed ministers. I was on the board of a Reformed college. I got to help these guys out. And I said, well, the only thing to do with it is to privatize student housing. He had negotiated with Rutgers, and like the last 5 presidents, they hadn't been able to put a deal together. So I agreed to buy 4 acres in the middle of Rutgers campus for $35 million. The Rutgers president called me about 3 days later and started screaming at me. And what do you do when the president of your alma mater calls and screams at you and calls you names? You hang up on him. About 20 minutes later, he called me back. We had a meeting. We figured out. And we changed Rutgers campus forever. You know, one of the things, you know, that I had kind of the advantage when I took my kids around to look at schools, I looked at, you know, thought about Rutgers and said, geez, you know, like there's really no there. And I think we did a really good job. This is the Honors College, which we built, which we own. This is the new academic building. This was the first academic building built on the Rutgers campus since 1960 when Scott Hall was built. And then we took this parking lot, which had been the home of the grease trucks, when the Rutgers president said, we can't, that's a tradition, we can't get rid of the grease trucks. And I said to him, haven't you been a university president long enough? Don't you know that 25% of the student body's leaving, 25%'s never been here before, and the 2 in the middle will eventually leave and everybody will forget about it. So we built this building, and we built the Yard, which is one of the more successful kind of real estate projects in New Brunswick. We have about 20,000 square feet of retail space. About 450 students live here. We built a park. We put a Jumbotron in. We have yoga at 10 o'clock on Sunday mornings. We have movie nights. We had salsa night the other night. It really has kind of helped create a sense of community. This is really bad pictures. This is the George Street Theater, which if you haven't been around in the last 2 years, you've never seen. It's the old YMCA where I learned to swim. And this is what we're building right now. This is the New Brunswick Performing Arts Center. This is great, another great example of how we kind of put together a public-private partnership. So the bottom 60,000 square feet of this building, we spent $60 million on. We built a opera house, and we built a performing arts theater. We built 6 gorgeous glass frontage rehearsal spaces. We built office space for the not-for-profit arts organizations. We have 4 resident companies that are already scheduled to do 340 performances starting in September. This is now the new home of the George Street Playhouse, the Crossroads Theater Company, the American Repertory Ballet, and the Mason Gross Opera Company. So how did we pay for that? I cobbled together a whole variety of government programs. Actually had some special legislation passed. It paid off that I had been nice to Chris Christie because he signed it in the last couple of days of his administration. We got $40 million worth of tax credits. We used some of them for the housing. We're building 207 apartments on top of this building. We were already renting 2-bedroom apartments on the top 2 floors for almost $4,000 a month. Somebody has asked us to take 3 apartments and put them together and has agreed to sign a 6-year lease and pay $13,000 a month for the apartment. We have a swimming, I gotta show you that because we had a swimming pool on the roof. And we're doing affordable housing in this building, 20%. And what we're doing is focusing it on it being available to artists. So we're hoping that actors, musicians, choreographers, playwrights, people who build sets, and kind of make an interesting community. None of those people make any money, so they kind of qualify for the affordable units. So we are doing that. We have like most of our projects, we have a private sector partner, usually when I do residential. So Penrose from Philadelphia is our partner. And then what we do in all these buildings is we kind of condominiumize the interests. We kind of control the bottom part, and he'll kind of control the top. This kind of shows you the theaters. This is what the building really looks like. Again, none of you probably have been around for the last 4 or 5 years, but this was, back when I was in school, first of all, you know you're old when buildings that were built when you were in college get torn down. This was a parking garage. This was urban renewal at its best in the 80s. Build a big parking garage next to the train station. People from the suburbs will come in the morning, run across the street, come home at night, run across the street, and at least there was about that 15 minutes of activity. That no longer is a reason for being. So we tore that project down, that building down. We have 4 acres in the center of town. And this is what we're now headed towards. We've got approval for 1.8 million square feet. It's called the New Jersey Innovation and Technology Hub. The first building we think we'll be ready to announce in the next couple months, about 350,000 square feet. It'll be a big incubator space that Rutgers is going to operate. There's going to be some collaborative workspace that the university is going to operate. The EDA is going to build an accelerator space for small companies. We have three major, one not-for-profit hospital system that's going to put its research facilities here. And then we are going to, we've got two pharmaceutical companies that will probably go in this building. That'll be the first building, about 350,000 square feet, and we have the ability to build 4 more buildings on the site over the future. We think we'll do 100,000 square feet of hospitality and retail, probably 300 housing units, and probably when we're done, about 800,000 square feet of research space and office space. So, yeah, I would do this all over again, even though I could have made more money doing Walgreens.
That's right.
But you know what? I get a real kick out of it. And you know what? If you don't enjoy what you're doing, don't do it. You know, don't get yourself into a thing where you're doing it and you may find yourself making too much money and you hate what you're doing. It's not to say you can't make a lot of money finding things that you love. But this has just been quite a trip. I probably expect to do it for a while yet. We've built building. We own about 1 million square feet in Newark. Most of it done with one of the universities. And we just finished $250 million in Atlantic City. We built the first student housing on the ocean on the East Coast. You know, I'm used to building buildings and people bring bikes and there's bike racks. This is the first time I had to build a building with surfboard storage. But we've actually changed the neighborhood, you know, and this is a business that is block by block, intersection by intersection. You know, it's not lightning in a bottle. But in Atlantic City, where there was vacant lots, at one intersection now, there's 2,500 people every day either going to work, going to teach, going to class, coming to visit. And it really has changed the tempo of that street. You start to see now in the outlying streets where people start to open small businesses. You got to have the sub shop, you have to have the nail place, you have to have the liquor store, you have to open the small, neighborhood tavern. And that stuff has started to happen. So this is a job where you can have some fun, you make a little money, but you really do leave places differently than you found them. And that's something that's been important to me, so thanks.
You know, to sum it up, Chris is really playing Monopoly with real money and real buildings and having a lot of fun doing it. The next speaker is Tara Williams, who I am very, very proud of. We worked together for 14 years.
Wow.
I had a building in downtown Philadelphia, which was a loft building. Loft building is a nice word for vertical warehouse. And I made it into the Philadelphia Design Building. So I tore off the sheetrock and I had exposed brick and I put in floor-to-ceiling windows. Upstairs, we exposed the oak roof. I mean, the building is 100 years old. The oak roof, and we put clear stories in. So we popped up the roof and put lighting around the roof that was popped up. And we called it the Philadelphia Design Building, and we filled it up with architects and engineers and people in the design business. And there was no design building in Philadelphia, so we had a monopoly. And the manager says, I'm going to retire to Florida. And I said, oh, well, I mean, who the hell's going to run the building? She said, well, I got a friend. Her name is Tara Williams. Okay, what does she know about real estate? Nothing. I said, that's a good start. She said, but I'll train her. She said, how long? Well, a month or so, as long as I can, and then I'm going to Florida. So we brought Tara on, and we were together 14 years. When you people started to take over the world, we changed. We no longer called ourselves the Design Building, we called ourselves the Millennial Building, because it was a building that millennials like to work in, with the exposed heating and air conditioning and the lighting and so on. And then Vanguard leased the top floor, and they had all these news conferences about, it was their first move back into Philadelphia in 15 years, and they leased the top floor, and they had taken right of first refusal on all the other space. It was a sales story. It was like going to become the Vanguard building. And people know what Vanguard is. It's a massive money management company that I think they manage 6 or 7 trillion in money, a little bit of change. And so their news conferences was my sale portfolio, and people started breaking down the door to buy it because Vanguard's a AAA credit and they were going to take over the whole building and so on. So because of the way Tara ran it and because of the way it looked and so on, we sold that building for the highest per square foot price of any building in downtown Philadelphia history up till then. I don't know what's happened since then. It was 2 years ago. And the buyer was Stoltz from Delaware. They moved their office to Philadelphia, and they have property all over the country. They're a massive firm that takes pension fund money and invests in real estate. And Tara's now managing 8 properties for them. So Tara, come up and talk about yourself.
I think I'm going to start hanging out with Chris. Maybe I'll become governor. So as Paul was saying, I had no previous experience with real estate. I worked in healthcare, in geriatrics and long-term care for about 15 years. And a friend of mine came to me one day and said, "Hey, I'm going to quit my job and I think you should take it over." And I said, "I don't know anything about real estate." She said, "You're very organized. You know, you've managed people, you've managed your household, you've supervised people. You can totally do this." Thought she was completely crazy, but I was looking. You know, healthcare can really wear you out. There's a lot of red tape involved, and I was starting to get kind of burnt out. Looking for a new challenge, I thought, "What the heck? I'll go interview with this guy." So I met him in, was it Newark, Penn Station, I think?
Yeah, that's right.
And we interviewed, and somehow he hired me. I think it was based heavily on her recommendation and the fact that she said she would train me. I think I promised him 2 years because I was going to school at the time I was a psychology major. And 16 years later, here I am. I don't really know what happened, but I just enjoyed it. I just picked it up, and I did. Josie, the previous manager, and Paul really helped train me, and gave me a lot of good information, and I just sort of picked it up. I did end up completing school and getting my degree, but I did end up, just liking it and staying with it. So if you're making a decision to move forward into real estate now, you're saving yourself a lot of time. So my company, Stoltz Management, Stoltz Real Estate, we do similar to what Paul does. We find properties that maybe need a little bit of TLC, maybe are undervalued, in major markets generally across the country, and we purchase those companies or purchase those properties and add value to those properties, enhance them, make them pretty, then either turn them around and sell them or hold on to them and just keep bringing in the rents. The goal always is 100% occupancy. So the goal of you purchase a building, you want to make that building attractive for a certain clientele of tenants. In Philadelphia, the one building that Paul was talking about it's a very old, it's not designated historic, but it's an historic building, and because of the features of it, there aren't many buildings like that in Philadelphia. So when we expose those features of that building, there's a certain clientele that, certain companies that want to come into that building. We got that 100% leased. As he said with Vanguard, they've since expanded within the building, and other companies come in. It's not so much of a design area anymore of Philadelphia. It's just a complete mix of tenants. So you get a building leased up to 100% or close to 100%, and then once again sell it for profit or hold on to it for rents. My goal or my job, what I do is manage all the aspects of those day-to-day operations, any special projects that may go on in the building. So that includes hiring, training, directing staff to do whatever needs to be done in the building. We have some buildings that have security on site. We have some buildings that have on-site maintenance that work directly for us. We have contractors and vendors that I need to write contracts and enforce contracts with that do work. I will supervise those projects, supervise all the maintenance, make sure all the maintenance gets done, and also supervise tenant improvement projects. You know, you have a new tenant who comes in and they don't want the space as it is. They want new carpet, they want new paint, they might want a different layout, put some walls up, take some walls down. And I'll supervise all of that. I also enforce leases. Generally don't write them. We have other people that do that, but I do enforce them. It's a big part of my job. I approve bills, maintain the budget, and do a multitude of other accounting functions. So I do get paid a salary to perform all of these functions. How many hours a week do I work? I guess the actual on-site work product would probably be what most people would consider a 40-hour week, but I'm on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So you're always thinking, as Chris said, there's always something going on. People are always calling you or emailing you. Sometimes you check that email, sometimes you just step away. There's a lot of travel involved. My commute to my main office building in Philadelphia, where my office is in one of my buildings, is a little bit over an hour. So probably add 12 to 14 hours a week of commute to that, 40 hours. And then I have, other buildings that I travel to. Some are 20 minutes away, some are an hour and a half away. So commuting to and from properties to see properties is also part of the workday and part of that increased time. Another thing to keep in mind when you are a property manager and you take a vacation, you may have someone who's taking calls for you, handling emergencies in your absence, but all that work's going to be there when you get back. No one's doing that work. I don't know of a company that has property managers that share their responsibilities. So while someone might handle an emergency for you while you're gone, everything that comes in is you're catching up when you get back. I mean, you just get used to it. It's not really that big of a deal. Checking on, there is one way to get around that. Go to the bottom of a canyon where you can't get cell service, and then no one will bother you for the week of your vacation. I have done that. So checking, as I mentioned, checking on properties. I have 8 properties, as Paul said, and I try to check on all of them at least every week or two. If there are major projects going on or tenant improvements or something like that, or major problems and issues, I will go more often. If everything's really smooth and nothing is breaking, sometimes I'll skip a week. It's really within my discretion, and I like that. I like being able to control that and that being my decision. So the commute can vary for different people. If you live in a large city and you manage all of your properties within that city, you're not going to have much of a commute. I happen to live in a very rural area, and there are no property management jobs that I could pay my bills where I live. So in order to make the kind of money that I want to make, I need to go to big markets, major markets. Philadelphia, I have buildings in Philadelphia. I have buildings in not in Baltimore City, but in Baltimore County, and on the Eastern Shore. So all over the place, and hence the travel. The travel can wear on you if you let it, but it's also kind of nice because a lot of your time is in an office, at a desk, at a computer. So it gives you the opportunity to kind of break that day up and move around. So I like it. I mentioned the emergency calls. I mean, numbers of emergencies can depend upon the nature of your portfolio. For example, I have about 85 tenants in my portfolio. If you think about the fact that some companies within that portfolio, those people who rent from us could have 100 plus employees, that just increases the chances for getting emergency calls, right? Or complaints. all leases with tenants should have very specific parameters, let's say, for what is an emergency and what is not an emergency. I think we all know that we're all human, and tenants may not think that lease is relevant or read that lease, and so they often think an emergency is something when you don't consider that to be an emergency. So you really have to establish clear lines with tenants about what that is. And generally, tenants aren't going to set those boundaries. So you have to set those boundaries. The position of the moon at any given night could cause a tenant to think something's an emergency. So, I mean, those things can be stressful. Staff can stress you out. I think the first month I worked for Paul, I had to terminate an employee for showing up to work intoxicated. And I'd never fired anyone before. It's like 1 month in, and here I am. This is going to be great. This is going to be a great future. But it turned out to be okay. I got someone in his place that ended up being good. It was a good team. So you can, staff, I've had staff hide in corners, doing everything they can to avoid their work, talking on phones. In my tenants report, they were sitting in a corner for an hour talking on phones. You just have to get through that, move on, make your expectations to any employees that you have very clear. And if it doesn't work out, you move on until you have a good team. Right now, I feel very good about the team that I have, but I went through a lot of bad eggs to get there, and that's just kind of part of the game. Tenants can certainly stress you out, calling you when they don't need to call you. I've been in courtrooms face-to-face against a tenant that I see in the hall every day because we've had to sue them for some reason. I sat in an arbitration once with a tenant who had moved out, and after the arbitration, he wrote a letter to me stating that he had always found me to be an upstanding person, but he accused me of lying during the arbitration, which of course I did not, and said quite a few other nasty things in the letter, and then proceeded to say, "Enjoy this bottle of wine." Needless to say, I did not open that wine, ever. I don't really know what happened there. And this tenant was really a problem for some time. So we're all human. You can't take anything personally. You do have to have a bit of a thick skin. I did not have that when I came on board with Paul. He and the tenants really made me, helped me out with that. You get to a point where you compartmentalize, meditate, do whatever you need to do, but ultimately, you can't take anything personally. It's all business. You can have new jobs. As with any new job, you can stress because you have to learn new things. When I transitioned to Stoltz, I had additional properties right away, not 8, but I had 2 additional properties right away that I had to start maneuvering. I had new property management systems, new work order systems, new accounting systems that I had to learn. So the first couple of months that I transitioned, I really worked a lot of extra hours, probably 2 extra hours a day. In the end, that really, I think, helped. I learned a lot more, and everything became so much smoother because of it. So it's really worth it to put that time in to learn those procedures. Tenant complaints can be a little funny at times, and things may not seem funny at the time. I recently had a residential tenant complain that someone was leaving bags of dog waste outside of his door. And luckily, I have a video camera on that area. So I looked at the video, and I found that my maintenance guy was walking his dog, this tenant's dog, the same tenant's dog. And while he was taking the dog inside after the walk, put the dog waste bag on the ground and forgot to pick it up and take it to the trash can room where it was supposed to go. So it was really interesting to go back to that tenant and explain to him that it was his dog and his dog waste, and then try to figure out why my maintenance guy was walking tenants' dogs during his shift. These things are going to happen. There are always going to be people who just simply do things that you would not do and that you would not want them to do. You just have to deal with it, figure out how to move on, and everything is going to be okay. So whether or not you stress about all of these things, these are just some examples of things that might stress you out. But I kind of look back on them now, and they're funny stories to me. At the time, I'm like, why are these people doing this? But in the end, it's really kind of funny looking back. It's fun to sit around and talk about the stories, the crazy things that have happened. And one of the things I really love about my job is finding solutions to things. I do have a building that's over 100 years old. There are the solutions that might not work for many buildings, that might work for many buildings, don't work for that building. It's older. You have to get creative. You have to think outside the box. And that's probably one of the things that I enjoy most about my job is actually solving those problems. It really feels good particularly when you've had a problem that you just over and over you can't really solve. And then finally something clicks and you get it and you solve the problem. Having a network of people, of contractors and vendors around really helps solve that problem. They can walk you through things, or in the end, maybe they need to actually just come and fix it. But having that network and being nice to everyone really helps, because people will come back and do things for you, if you just treat them well. So I've talked about my work environment a little bit. I work at a desk at a computer probably about 75% of the time, writing contracts, doing, approving bills, things like that. The rest of the time is spent traveling to properties for meetings, inspections, visits. I'm the type of person who really likes I'm visual. So if one of my employees is talking to me about a problem or an issue with a roof or something, I need to see it. It just doesn't, describing it to me doesn't always translate. So I really just like to take a look at it myself and hence come up with a solution. Salary range, I'm not really sure officially what the range is, but from a little bit of research that I did, it seems like it's about $45,000 and you can make over $100,000 in property management. Commercial management is generally higher paying. You might make a little bit under 45 if you're just managing one apartment complex, and you might get a discount or a free apartment unit with that. You might make $120,000 if you are managing several million square feet of high-end high-rises in New York City. So it just all depends on the company that you're with, the type of properties that you have, and so on. A lot of companies want licenses, certifications, a degree in the education that you're getting here now would be very helpful. So now I just want to share a couple of the things that I really, really enjoy about my job, and those are improvement projects. So I just want to show you a few examples of renovations. I'm sorry the pictures are not that great, but renovations that were done within one of my buildings, so that you can see, it's one of the things that I really like, is just taking something that, is outdated, and then someone just makes it beautiful, much like Chris was talking about. So this first picture that you've been looking at, this ugly brown doors whole time, I'm sorry, is a tenant entrance. And it's a suite entrance in one of my buildings. This is the entrance, or was the entrance next to that. We closed off that entrance right there, made it a wall, and created two new entrances sort of right next to each other. So when you step off the elevator, this is what you see: glass, natural light, everything opened up. This is inside of one of those tenant spaces, lovely 80s workstations, and this is during when we tore out the workstations, tore out the carpet, tore down some walls. This is just another perspective of the way that the suite was. And you can see that back here, we exposed the brick wall. That's another great feature of one of my buildings, is that it has a lot of exposed brick. And at some point, a lot of that was closed in, but people like to really expose it now. That one seems to be really small, but I don't know if you can see back there, but that is the exposed brick, and there's a mural on the wall. And then this is another perspective of the building: exposed brick back here, everything opened up, concrete, polished floors, and this is something that the tenant who moved in wanted.
That's the coffee place, right?
That's correct, yes. That's his building. This is a bathroom that was renovated to that. And another bathroom. We had a tenant move in who was a tile company, and they put their tile in the bathrooms. This is Paul and I did this while we worked together in Philadelphia. We had about 9,000 square feet of basement space that was just sitting there useless, not collecting any rent, which is the goal, right, of real estate and owning buildings. And we decided to make storage units. So we built about 25 storage units in this space. And it was a pretty small investment. We ended up getting a couple $1,000s a month in rents from tenants, different size spaces, everything from 100 square feet to 500 square feet spaces. So it's just one of these things where if you think outside the box, like how can I create more money out of this space? And that's what we did there. This is a mural restoration that we did, same building. This is one aspect of it. You can see that it's pretty worn. This mural actually predates Paul had this commissioned in the early 80s. It predates the mural arts program in Philadelphia by a couple of years.
It started.
Did it start it? Okay. And this was originally done early 80s. With wind and rain back there, it really kind of chewed it up. And so there's the aspect of that, the bottom and the top redone. We commissioned the Mural Arts Advocates in, I think it was about 2015, to completely renovate the mural. So they left everything as is, but completely repainted the entire thing. It took about 3 months. They did every single step by hand on lifts and things like that. It was pretty amazing to watch. This is the entire mural. Again, very worn over here. And then as it is, refurbished and refinished. So it's really exciting. I mean, even though things take months or sometimes even years, it's exciting to know what something looked like and then be a part of renovating that and, just making it beautiful again. So would I do this again? Sure I would. I mean, it was a really big leap of faith at the time, but I really think I made a good decision in taking the step to interview with Paul and make the move into real estate. I think it turns out that I'm pretty suited for property management. I like seeing projects through to completion, supervising staff, and, as I said, solving problems. So if you see yourself enjoying these things, this might be a good fit for you too. Thanks.
The great thing about working with Tara is she's 100% honest, 100% honest. Whatever she told you happened is what happened. No embellishment. So if a tenant ever said, oh, that bitch, she was rude to me and said, I knew they were lying. Tara's always calm, cool, collected, never loses it, never had a meltdown, never told anybody off, even though they should have been. And you could take what she said to the bank. You're just an absolutely wonderful person to work with. One more thing I forgot to tell you. Remember I was telling you about those mortgages? You go from 4 to 8 to 20 and so on. There's one other advantage of real estate I didn't mention to you. Does anybody know what an exculpatory mortgage is? You teaching these guys real estate? No one knows. Exculpatory mortgage. Most people, when they go to the bank, they borrow money, they sign the note personally, and they're personally liable. In real estate, you can get an exculpatory mortgage, which means the lending institution, a bank, insurance company, pension fund, only looks to the collateral, the building. So if for any reason it doesn't pay the debt service anymore and you want to walk away, you give them the keys and it's theirs and you have no personal liability. So that's just one more advantage. Our next speaker is Shirlene Roberts. She's another Rutgers person, Rutgers College, Rutgers Law School. Then she went to work for Hovnanian. And after that, she went to work for one of the biggest law firms in the state, Greenbaum Rowe. And now she's with Heller. Does anybody know about Heller Industrial? Okay. Oh, you do? Okay. Heller is one of the giants that's very much off the radar screen. Ike Heller was an iconic guy, was very unusual, very colorful. He's passed away now. He built about 15 million square feet of industrial space, very old-fashioned, got a construction mortgage, paid it off, left the building free and clear. So he's got about 15 million square feet. So if you never should count other people's money, but you figure 10 million square feet has the mortgage paid off and he's averaging $5 a square foot, you can do the math, what the cash flow is. It's a nice estate. Shirley.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for letting me join tonight. And thanks, Paul, because you took half my script here. So, yes, I am a Rutgers grad, and right after Rutgers undergrad, at that time it was Rutgers College, I wanted to go to law school because I thought I was going to be a trial attorney. Graduated, went to Greenbaum, and was a litigator, but somehow I got thrown into construction litigation. Particularly fire retardant treated plywood on condominiums and townhouses throughout New Jersey that was crumbling after sustained high temperatures. And so somehow I got into construction, representing lots of developers, representing condominium associations, and eventually I was asked to come in-house by one of the biggest clients we had at the time and one of the biggest real estate residential developers in New Jersey. That was Kay Hovnanian. And I was there for about 10 years. There, I learned land use. They asked me to join them, and I said, what would I do? And they said, well, you'll do land use. You'll get our approvals for all of our projects. And I said, I don't know how to do land use. And they said, you'll learn. So I went, and they were right. I learned it. I learned it pretty fast, and got a lot of projects approved for Kay Hovnanian. Rode that wave from 97 to about 2007 when residential real estate in New Jersey was super, super hot. I got off the train just in time, and because the Great Recession came, but I did go back to private practice for a little while, again, doing construction litigation, until I was able to find another in-house position because I really, really liked being in-house. I liked being corporate counsel. I liked being part of a business team, one client, one goal, make money. And so I was able to take the opportunity to join Heller about 6.5 years ago. This time, it was industrial warehousing, not residential. I did a short stint with a retail developer, so I've done residential, I've done retail, and now I'm in industrial warehousing, which I'm sure every single one of you orders from Amazon. So thank you, because of you, Amazon and retailers and big box e-commerce type of retailers need big warehouses. And they want to be here in New Jersey in particular. North America, this is a super, super hot hub right here where we are, close to the turnpike, close to the ports, close to New York City, sandwiched between New York City and Philadelphia. This is the place to be. So I'm having a lot of fun right now working at Heller because of that. It's a lot of good things going on. So I work as general counsel because I do have a law license, so I have to do lawyer stuff. I do handle all of their legal affairs. I manage and oversee the legal department, which is comprised of me, the only lawyer, a paralegal, and a contract administrator. Quickly, as Paul said, we have about 15 million square feet. Much of it is in New Jersey. We have a big industrial park in Edison, about 10 minutes from here. I apologize, I don't have too many great things to share with you visually, but this is one area of our industrial park in Edison, right across from the Middlesex County College. If you're familiar with that area, we have about 8.5 million square feet. And we have another fairly large park in South Brunswick, and that is about 3.5 million square feet currently. But I actually have gotten approvals for an additional 2.2 million square feet. We're going to go back, though, to the planning board to get some adjustments to that approval, but we're hoping to break ground on an additional 2 million square feet next year. We have a smaller one in Franklin, and then we have some standalone properties in North Jersey, Harrison, Kearney, to name a few. We also have properties in Pennsylvania, Texas, Illinois, and Kentucky. So Paul wanted me to tell you how we make money. Well, he, again, kind of stole my thunder and already told you how we make money. But we basically build, lease, and manage strategically located distribution centers throughout the country, primarily in New Jersey. Year in and year out, we've been consistently maintaining a near 0% vacancy rate, which really stands as a testament to Mr. Heller's vision and also to the economy right now, especially in the last 5 years or so. But it's based on a couple of Heller's philosophies, which I'll run through with you really quick. One, build and hold its portfolio. So Mr. Heller's motto was, build it, I'm not flipping it, I'm holding it. He always saw every building as a long-term investment, so we don't build to flip at a profit. Even if we could, we don't. We also supervise all of our construction and do all our own general contracting. So that means that we can save money on construction, which in turn means that we can offer rental rates at a really competitive price for our tenants. It also ensures that we kind of have hands-on involvement and to make sure that we don't compromise on quality and design and construction. And we reposition older assets. Many of Mr. Heller's buildings are now 30-plus years old, which means we have to spend money, we have to spend capital kind of upgrading them, upgrading things like sprinkler systems, overhead doors. Our overhead doors are now having to get bigger because there's bigger trucks. They require bigger open spaces, things like that. So repositioning is something that is very important, and we do to keep our portfolio in shape. Second thing is that we keep our services in-house, and that helps keep costs down. So we have in-house legal, me, architectural, engineering, leasing, accounting, and tenant service departments. So we're a real hands-on, no-frills company. And we do it with less than 50 employees, which include, I want to say, close to a dozen field personnel that actually go out to our buildings to do construction-related, tenant service-related things. We develop strong tenant relationships so that a reason why we don't have a lot of vacancy is because our tenants stay. They stay for really long periods of time. We have tenants that have been with us 20-plus years. So that's because, we try to really develop and maintain good customer relationships. That's always going to be, a key part of whatever you do in real estate. Sort of similar to what Chris said is, you can't burn bridges with people in the real estate community because you may be doing business with them, at one time or another. But that's the same with tenants. We've had tenants who have left and then come back. So you don't want to burn bridges. We have also developed an expertise in special use buildings. We design buildings that have refrigerated warehousing with sophisticated temperature and humidity control. We have buildings for extruding and manufacturing plastic products, which demand heavy electrical power. We have some facilities that store environmentally sensitive products, so they require special containment structures in place in cases of emergency. Another principle is, and again, Paul mentioned it before, we believe in high equity with a low debt service. Mr. Heller operated on the theory that buildings free of debt make good business sense, and he was right. For him, he was absolutely right. So a statistic that I got from my accounting department says that less than 1/3 of our rent goes towards paying debt service. I think that's actually an older number, but I know it's also an extremely low number for our industry. As Mr. Heller once said, when you're debt-free, you can walk on water. He always had these very interesting sayings, but that really is true, sort of like cash is king. And last, we hold properties in strategic locations. Like I mentioned before, our Edison and South Brunswick parks are in very key, great locations. In Edison, we're right on the Northeast Corridor, minutes from the Turnpike, Route 287, Route 1, Route 18, not too far from the ports, 40 minutes away from New York City. So we're close to major highways, we're close to where there's a lot of different kinds of transportation for trucks and rail, as well as abundant labor sources. So that's really, those are all the philosophies that go into making Heller successful. So that's how we make money. How do I, myself, help the company make money? Our core business is leasing, so I make sure that my priority is always to be handling the leasing, reviewing leases, drafting them, negotiating them. How do I make money for the company? I try not to kill the deal. I try to do whatever I can to help negotiate to a point where we can all write, ink our signatures on the last page. I try not to stand on ceremony. Sometimes I get the fancy schmancy lawyers from New York City that, want to, put in all this stuff, and I try to keep it simple, but I also don't stand on pride of authorship. Hey, you want to change it to read like that? Fine, we'll do it. But will your client sign this lease tomorrow? Yes, okay. Obviously, I have to protect my client, which I always do, but I don't let my pride get involved in the middle of that. And I also look to resolve issues. I try to be a problem solver as opposed to being, the litigator that I once was. No, this is, our position, and this is where we're going to stay. A lot of times I'm not the business person in the room, but I'm the one that throws out a possible business solution. And sometimes they nod their heads and say, yeah, that'll work. So that's what I try to do to help my client make money. How many hours a week do I work? I don't watch the clock. I certainly don't work as much as I used to in private practice, where I would be the ones bringing lit bags home, on the weekends. But it depends. It depends on how much I'm needed in that particular week. I could work a 40-hour week, or some weeks I'm working 60 hours. So it doesn't really, there's no particular amount of time. My job is not stressful. And I say that because, as you get older, you get wiser. So I've learned to do things or not do things that keep my stress levels down. So I'm going to give you a couple of those tips as well, which, you can use at home, you can use at work, real estate, whatever you do. One is time management. You got to be a good time manager. Part of that is also knowing how to prioritize. And on any given day, you could prioritize once, twice, or 20 times. You have to be able to do that because depending on what your boss is telling you or what calls you receive, you may have to change those priorities, and you have to be able to go with the flow. Also, don't be a slave to email. I'm sure you've heard that a million times already, but don't be a slave to email. Don't let it control you. You control it. The second thing is surround yourself, obviously, with a very competent team and delegate. I have a great paralegal and contract administrator, and because I feel they are competent, I delegate. And I am a type A personality by nature, but yet I have no problem delegating if I have the confidence in my team. So when you have your own real estate business, get people in place that you can trust and delegate. Don't be afraid to, and talking about delegation, I also, I use outside resources. I have a paralegal and a contract administrator, but oftentimes there are things as an attorney that I need help. I'm not an environmental lawyer. So if environmental issues come up, I'm not afraid to go outside and retain outside environmental counsel as an example. Because here's another tip to keep the stress level down. Know what you don't know. Don't try to pretend like you know a special area of real estate, or for me, it's law, because that's really stressful. Because you're either trying to learn it or you're trying to hide that you don't know it. Fess up and tell your team or tell your boss, you know what, I don't know that. We might need to get an outside marketing person or an outside lawyer, an outside accountant, whatever, to help. Know what you don't know. Also, don't be afraid to make a decision once you're fully informed. But at some point, and I tell my kids this, make a decision and live by it. And you know what? Maybe it'll be a mistake, but at some point you have to make a decision, because when you flounder, or you vacillate, that gets stressful as well. Which goes to the mistake tip, which is own up to your mistakes. Whether it's for me, drafting, sometimes I make mistakes. There's a typographical error that, changes the meaning of a provision, or oops, sorry, the number got transposed. Own up to it, and then send out a corrective amendment to the lease. The longer you don't own up to the mistake, the more stressful it becomes, and obviously you're doing a disservice to your team, to your company, to your business. So I live by all those rules, and because of that, I don't really have a lot of stress at work. At home, yes, but not at work. Work environment, our office is very small, and also it was founded by Isaac Heller, who, again, as Paul said, kind of had some old school philosophies, which are still maintained. So, they do watch the clock. Everybody needs to be punctual. You need to be in the office. It's no working from home. That remote stuff just doesn't work, but that's okay. Let's see. What range of earnings can someone in your business expect to make? Well, my business, it has a number of different team members in accounting and leasing, in construction, so I can't speak to all of them, but in a position like myself, if you decide instead of getting an MBA or doing some business graduate degree, go to law school. You could still be in real estate. And people in my position, general counsel, at least for real estate in New Jersey, I mean, you can make six figures, and you can, working with a successful company, probably be part of a bonus program, which can be phenomenal. And you may be able to take on more responsibility in an executive position, general counsel and executive and vice president of acquisitions or operations or whatever that can be. So I don't feel like my law degree is a hindrance. I think to me it's just another skill in my basket. But I, am involved with the business side of the company all the time, which is what I love. So that means going to the last question, would I do it again? Yes, absolutely. So I get to have the best of both worlds. I get to be a lawyer, which is what I've always wanted to be, but I also get to be in business, and I didn't even go to school for business. But yet I'm in the business world. I do add value. I do contribute on that side of the fence, and it's welcomed, and it's a great job. So before I end, does anybody want to see what one of our warehouses look like? Because I do have an aerial. I don't know, do we have a time, or are we running out of time? Okay. Wait, where is it? Sorry, Michael. It's not very, is this a Mac?
Yes, it is.
Oh, that's why.
Since
So just go to my, I'm not responsible for the music. This is in South Brunswick. 285,000 square feet. It was just built 2.5 years ago. This is only 285,000 square feet. The building next to it is over 1.2 million square feet. So you can imagine how big that would look inside.
That's where all my palettes go.
You get the idea, right? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charlene. Our last speaker, Sunny Jamani, got a Bachelor's of Commerce from the Indian Institute of Management and Commerce in Hyderabad. Close? Hyderabad, India. Then he became an asset manager for Kubani Enterprises, an owner of 1 million square feet of suburban office and apartments. And that was his first job in the U.S. And then from that, he's become, I know he was partners with,
Lloyd Salford.
yeah, Lloyd, yeah. And now he's the president of Tulsa. Interesting. The business plan is buy complex, sell simple. Strategy with our strategy with real estate is buy it, fix it, sell it. We are strictly a value creation real estate investor. We don't do value add or hold stabilized assets for other people or institutions. It's 100% our own equity. We are completely agnostic as to asset class. We'll do industrial, retail, housing, office, medical, self-storage, mixed use. We only invest in Northern Jersey, strictly invest in the counties of Bergen, Passaic, Morris, Essex, Hudson, Union, and Middlesex. Our expertise is in distressed properties, distressed of all kinds, distress from litigation, land use, obsolescence. Sunny has worked on over $600 million in transactions over 17 years in all aspects of the real estate: acquisition, development, financing, debt, equity, leasing, selling, and asset management. He was also nominated to the EY Enterprise. That's not young.
No.
Okay, whatever. EY Entrepreneur of the Year and Future 50 Smart CEOs. Sunny Jamani.
As Paul said, first of all, this is a very hard act to follow. Jimi Hendrix, Pink Floyd, and Bob Marley. So I'm going to have a hard time here, but bear with me. Our business plan is very simple: buy it, fix it, and sell it. It may sound like a flip. It's not. A good project could take anywhere between 3 to 5 years to exit. We are completely private. 3 of us own everything that we have. We do have a strategic partnership with John Hanson that Chris Palladino mentioned, and the Hampshire companies. They are the only outside partner we have in some transactions. We are completely agnostic to asset class. We'll develop across whether it's retail, industrial, office, residential. Recently, we have jumped into self-storage. Purely value creation. We are not your stabilized portfolio holders of assets. Because we are private, all of our decision-making is purely driven by the profit in the deal, not the size of the deal. One thing we are extremely binary about is location. If it's not in northern New Jersey, we don't buy it. Everything for us is about location, location, location. It doesn't make a difference what's the cost of concrete or the cost of steel. Ultimately, it's the land basis that matters to us. When I analyze any deal, it's about the land basis. I've been doing this for 17 years now. One very, very important lesson that I learned along the way, and I think probably Paul will disagree with me on this, we don't make decisions based on taxes. So if you are buying something, we're building it. When we get to sell it, if we cannot find an asset to replace it, we pay the taxes on it. We would rather sell it, pay the taxes on it, than make a wrong decision buying something in a 1031. So taxes is the last thing that we focus on when we make a decision on buying or selling of an asset. What I'm laser focused on always is the time of the cycle we are in. This is a cyclical business. It goes up, it goes down. It's a business of feast and famine. This is not an intergenerational business. I'm in business with my two partners, Lloyd Tulp and Sal Frasetto. The best result I think I can leave behind when I go is a pile of cash for my children and not a single building. So we'd be okay if we sell everything before one of us go. That's in a nutshell our business plan. I'm trying to keep my time down to 20 minutes. What do I do to make money? I'll give you a case study at the end which will show how we apply this, but primarily all I'm looking at is opportunity, where I can create value, whether it is environmental cleanups, whether it is litigation, corporate liquidation, bankruptcies. What happens is a lot of people get lost and misprice the asset because of all the uncertainty that is there. And I look at it on the other side of it, I provide certainty of closing. So when I buy an asset, I completely discount all the unknowns that are there, price it into my purchase price, and go in and buy with no contingencies. And that basically allows me to make money. And you'll see it in the case study that we have put up over here. How many hours a week do I work? I'll give you an example. I'm 44. I just got an email from John Hanson, who's been in the business for 60 years. And he started at 7 in the morning. He's still emailing me till now, asking me a question. So there is no time. You don't look at your clock when you're in this business. In the good times, 40, 50 hours, 60 hours. In the bad times, even more. There are good times and there are bad times, as I've said earlier. How stressful is your job? Again, depends on which time of the cycle you are in. In 2009, I couldn't give space away. I leased 1 million square feet of space for maybe a fifth of the rent that I was getting the year before in 2008. By way of an example, in 2009, I leased about 300,000 square feet of space for the cost of operating the space. Those are bad times. You work harder, extremely stressful, and then there are good times. This is 2006, 2007, we could sell anything. We are still in good times, I think. I don't think the game is over yet. We still have a couple more innings left. I think we are in the 6th innings. We probably still have 3 more innings to go. So these are good times. Is the stress level high? I don't think so. Work environment. Work environment is small. I learned the hard way what I can't do. I can't do property management. What Tara does is extremely harsh. I'm lazy by nature, I think. I do have a thick skin, but this is hard work, and I'm not good at that. So we outsource property management. What I'm good at is creating value. I am not good at dealing with, she has the patience to deal with this, I don't. So we learned that early enough in our business, and about 5 years ago, we basically outsourced everything. Our industrial platform, for example, is managed by NAI Hansen. Our self-storages are managed by CubeSmart. Our retail projects are managed by Avison Young. We prefer to use outside partners to deal with the time. Everything in the deal is about the time, and you only have so many hours in the day. I would rather be spending that time creating value than fixing problems. And the best part of any trade I'll do is I'll trade money for time. What I want trade is the other way. So any opportunity I get to get some time-consuming task outsourced, that's time I spend making money, not dealing with problems. What range of earnings can someone make in my business? So we have a number in our office. There are 3 partners. At worst, if the deal goes south, there has to be $3 million in the deal. Otherwise, don't do it, because that's the amount of time it's going to take. I think Paul or Chris said it earlier, whether it's a $1 billion project or a $600 million project or a $100 million project, they all take the same time. You have to execute. It's just the number of zeros are different. So there are projects that I know I can make money in it, but just not enough for the amount of time I have to spend on it. So every project we look at is like that. A good project, you can come in and out. I would say about anywhere between $10 to $15 million is the size of profit in the property. A bad project is at least $3 million. We underwrite it to that number. If that works, we go and invest in that project. Do I think I've made a good decision? I think I made a great decision. I came here 17 years ago with $2,500 in my pocket. I'm standing here talking next to Chris Palladino. I think I'm doing okay. This is a local business. I don't have the breadth of experience of Paul investing across state lines. This is a highly local business, to my knowledge, at least to my experience at least. If I can't drive to the property in 30 minutes, I don't invest in it. And believe me, there's enough opportunity here. We live within, I think in northern New Jersey, just the New Jersey population is 9 million people. Add in New York City, Long Island, the suburbs of Connecticut, you have significant customers here. So within 30 minutes from wherever you are, my personal opinion and experience has been, you'll do pretty well if you know the local market, because this is a local business. A couple of small sayings before we just switch to the case study, just to show you a practical application of our business philosophy. You have to choose to be rich or right. You can't be right every time. You have to make that choice. Many a times I get this, the customer is absolutely wrong, but guess what? He's the customer. So I choose to be wrong, but I want to be rich. That's a simple decision. You don't have to win every argument. You don't have to win every point. Just focus on the money. It's only an insult if it's true. Don't get insulted easily. I've been called names. I've been accused of things that I wasn't even here in this country when they happened. But you know what? It's only an insult if it's true. So don't get bothered by insults. Another thing that I've learned, find the older people in this business. This is not the stock market. This is not the bond market. The older the person you meet in this business, you get to spend 20 minutes with Chris Palladino or Paul Profeta, you'll learn more in a year working for someone else. Take that opportunity, have lunch with them, have coffee with them, steal 10 minutes of their time. The older people in this business can teach you a lot more in a 20-minute conversation than you can learn in 1 year working for someone. I also had a point about location, but we'll just switch to this particular case study. I'm not this forward.
There we go.
This is just a little blurb about our business. You can find it on our website, so I won't waste time on this. Those are 3 people that are in the business. I'm going to talk about this one project, 120 West Passaic Street in Rochelle Park. Public REIT owned this property, just about 9 acres of dirt in the middle of Bergen County, right behind the Garden State Mall. On the property, there was a 52,000 square foot old industrial building that was built as a concrete bunker, which AT&T used it as a data center. The building was literally built like a fortress. It was supposed to withstand a nuclear blast in New York City. I'm talking 1.5 foot thick walls, complete reinforced concrete. The problem was the property also had a couple of easements on it that prohibited development. There was a parking easement that basically prevented anything being developed on 7.5 of the 9 acres. There was a pond on the property that was deeded to the township, and you couldn't really do anything with it. Plus, it sat right behind the Garden State Mall, which is a highly trafficked location, and a public company that owned it with a very large tenant in place. we came along, we saw it, coincidentally, it's directly opposite our office. I must have seen this asset in the last 12 years, every day that I went to work. After about 3 years of tracking the public company, talking to them, they finally looked at us and said, is there a number that you can close without a contingency? And there was. We gave them the number and closed. This is just an aerial. You can see the arrow over there. That's the old building. So all of that parking lot that you see had a very large easement on it, which prevented any kind of development. That's the Garden State Mall, right behind the property. These are just some pictures of the bunker. We went in, established a redevelopment plan on the property that allows a development of 160 apartments, of which 136 will be market-based and 24 will be COA or affordable apartments. We also got approved on the same site, a 113,000 square foot self-storage building and 8,000 feet of a commercial establishment with a drive-through. This is what the plan looks like now. We have basically broken it up into 4 distinct lots. Just show you another. We ended up suing the town here. The town turned out to be a good partner. They worked it out with us, where we obtained the settlement agreement. We obtained a pilot agreement with the township. We got a density of 80 acres per unit. For suburbia, it's highly unheard of. We also got a couple of uses that the town was dead against, like self-storage. Self-storage had a stigma for all the wrong reasons. If you watch self-storage buildings now, they're built as good as apartment buildings. Old taxes. This project generated about $225,000 in taxes. We anticipate that based on the new development that we are going to make over here, the city looks like we'll end up picking up about $852,000 in taxes. So it was a big win for the city. Just some renderings of the buildings that we are developing on the site. That's a quick check, which I'd like to get done, but it's not approved, so I'm sure I've thrown it at the end. That's the view of the apartment building right next to the self-storage building. And basically, this is just to give you an idea on this project. We conservatively estimate that when it is monetized over the next 3 to 5 years, conservatively, we have created about $25 million of value. Eminent domain. We ended up using eminent domain we're in the process of wiping out the easement with eminent domain. We put in a redevelopment plan and then effectively started the eminent domain proceedings. And that's about the project. If you have any questions, I'm here to answer them. I have exactly 6 minutes and 46 seconds left. Thank you.